Yes, so we'll start with verse number 128, where Arjun starts speaking. So the now, the whole perception of Arjun has changed, as we noticed. In the beginning, he says that he wanted to see the Durbuddhe, Dhatarashtre Durbuddhe. He wanted to see the evil-minded sons of Duryodhan and the people who are supporting Duryodhan. But now suddenly he changes gears and he's calling them Swajanam. If you see in this verse right here, it's Swajanam. So Swajanam means kinsman. He's now calling them as his own. So his mood has changed now. So, and this is also it is also the first use of Krishna's name here in this verse. He says Krishna, Swajanam Krishna. So this is the first use of Krishna's name here also. So, so what we are now realizing from Arjun's situation is that when he saw his grandfather, his teacher, his brothers, cousin brothers, that put him into an illusion. So by seeing, so that's called pratyaksha. So he's seeing them. That has put him into an illusion. And as Shastra tells us, Shabda, that is the knowledge coming through the ears, listening, takes us out of that illusion. And that's what is going to happen with Arjun. That he'll be pulled out of that illusion by listening to Krishna. Right? The desire to for that, relying on our senses, that vision that Arjun was presenting, that I want to see whom am I fighting against. That causes a forgetfulness. So that was kind of, it weakened him in one sense. That weakened him, and that weakening now has put him into illusion, right? Whatever we see with our eyes, we should connect with the scriptures. That's the way the connection should be made. So feeling emotional is not wrong. There is no harm in that. When we see somebody else suffering, we feel compassion, but then those emotions have to be rightly placed. We cannot be misplaced emotions. Right? So, that misplaced emotion is the cause of the illusion and suffering of Arjun that we are noticing here. And as I mentioned the last time, we should not see that Arjun has an inherent defect in taking up this indecision. It's I gave the example of the mother teaching the daughter-in-law through her daughter. So that's the way the Krishna is doing. So, so this is as I said, the beginning of Arjun's reasons for not fighting. So this initially there is a start. As we'll read on, we will notice that there is a conflict between Arjun's selfish desire, or you can say the living entity's selfish desire, all of us, and Krishna's interest. So there's a conflict in there. Right? So there is me and mine. I, me, and mine is the concept that I am living in, and which is very different from Krishna's interest. So aham mameti, Shastras say that it's aham mameti, me and mine, that I'm all worried about. Right? So, but then Bhagavad Gita teaches us that Krishna's interest is more important. His desire has to be put forth. But then I put my self-desire, which comes into the picture, and that self-interest is being seen here. It says mama. The word mama comes here, my, right? So, and he's saying swajana. So that's the illusion there, right? So I consider my body and the extensions of my body as mine, right? That is what is being talked about right here in the first chapter, the Dehatma Buddhi. We talked about it in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. So this Dehatma Buddhi is the problem, is the root cause of the problem. And Krishna pulls us out of that Dehatma Buddhi concept by going through the whole Bhagavad Gita, right? So just imagine that a person like Arjun is not able to handle those challenges that are coming forth in his life. He also needs a teacher. So similarly, we also all need a teacher. Then Prabhupada's purport in here, let's quickly look at that. So Prabhupada is saying that such symptoms in Arjun were not due to weakness, but due to his soft-heartedness, a characteristic of a pure devotee of the Lord. And we will see that as we go forward in different purports, Prabhupada will address the symptom that Arjun is demonstrating differently. At some point, Prabhupada will call Arjun weak-minded, and he'll call him a material person. And some places he will call Arjun a devotee. So this is the beginning of this this whole seesaw of emotions that we will see. Okay, so coming back to the slide. So as I mentioned, so these are the 5 reasons, and Krishna will refute all these reasons in the 2nd chapter. We'll see that as we read forward. His compassion aspect, for example, will be responded in the 11th to 30th verse of the 2nd chapter. So Krishna will give specific answers to specific reasons that Arjuna is giving. Okay, so let's come to the first one, so which is signs of compassion. Arjuna is very compassionate here. So he's acting compassionately here, right? So that's verse 27 to 30. So let's just go to the Bhagavad Gita section. So next verse, 29. So this is an interesting verse. There's this phrase called Roma Harsha, standing on the hair on end, standing of hair on the end. And Prabhupada will explain in the purport that there are 2 kinds of trembling and 2 kinds of standing of the hair on the end. One is because of spiritual ecstasy, and the other is great fear. In this particular situation, Arjuna is demonstrating these symptoms out of fear of material conditions, right? So Prabhupada is telling that to us. Arjuna's symptoms in this situation are out of material fear, namely loss of life. But then, as we will read forward in the 11th chapter, when Arjuna will see the universal form of the Lord, that primarily there is a verse there. It's the 14th verse of the 11th chapter, where Arjuna again demonstrates the same symptom of hair standing on end, but that is because of spiritual ecstasy. So we'll see how from the 1st chapter till the 10th, where Krishna in one of the verses very clearly accepts whatever Krishna is saying, whatever Krishna is saying, Arjuna accepts that. That comes in the 12th verse of the 10th chapter. Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram Paramamma. So this transition happens in these first 10 chapters, and we'll see that when we reach that chapter, that still standing of hair on end happens, but that is because of spiritual ecstasy that Arjuna is facing. Okay, so this is the 29th verse. Yes. So as I was saying, that going back to here. So I mentioned about the seesaw of emotions. In the 28th verse, we read how Prabhupada is saying that the symptoms in Arjuna were due to weakness were not due to weakness, but soft-heartedness, which is the characteristic of a devotee. But then in this verse, Prabhupada is telling us that this particular symptom we are seeing is due to his material fear. So, and then the next verse also we'll see something similar. So that's what Prabhupada is telling us. So that this particular, the beauty of Prabhupada's purport is that every single emotion that Arjuna is demonstrating, Prabhupada very clearly tells us what is the origin of that emotion. Many purports in this chapter we'll see Prabhupada is praising Arjuna for being in that situation. But at many purports, he's also clearly saying that Arjuna is in the material concept of life. So that's an interesting aspect, and I'll try to highlight this. So I highlighted these 3 verses, but when we come to the first 10 verses of 2nd chapter, then I'll kind of show you a much broader picture of how Prabhupada is going back and forth. Okay, he's in devotee here, he's in the material mindset, devotee mindset. So Prabhupada keeps on explaining that seesaw of emotion that we are seeing in Arjuna to us. So the reason now somebody can ask us that, that Prabhupada's purports are confusing then, right? Then how is it that in one purport he's saying that this is out of material fear, in one purport Prabhupada is saying that Arjuna is a pure devotee? So the way to understand this concept is that when scriptures are narrated, they are not necessarily, the emphasis is not on what is right and wrong. Emphasis is on learning what we can learn, what we can imbibe out of that specific episode, right? So at one level, we can say that everything is being orchestrated as Lord's pastimes, right? And devotees are exhibiting different qualities. So from that perspective, Arjun is a devotee, and he is exhibiting quality of compassion, and we can learn from that. That's something for us to learn, right? That can everybody please mute themselves? I'm just kind of getting some echo, and it's distracting me a bit. Thank you. So that's the way to look at scripture. So whenever we see any contradictory aspects coming in the scriptures, we shouldn't sit down and start doubting scriptures. The way to look at them is that what is there for me to learn from there, right? For example, in Srimad Bhagavatam, when we read, there is episodes of I forget. I'm really bad at names. So there's an episode where Krishna is being blasphemed by his cousin brother, and now everybody remembers that name. I forgot that name in the Rajsuya Yagya. What was that person's name? Shishupal. I get that. Okay, I remembered it. Thank you, Krishna. So yes, Shishupal was being blasphemed, and there are so many names that he calls out to Krishna. He calls him that you leave the field and run away, and you are debauch, and whatnot. And now somebody can ask that, oh my God, here Lord is being criticized, and I have to read it. I have to go through it. So the way to look at all these, as I'm saying, is that whenever we see any of such thing in the scriptures, the goal should not be to criticize scriptures, but the goal should be to understand what is there for me to learn. So as I mentioned, in one episode, we see Prabhupada saying that, okay, this is Arjun is a devotee here, okay? And we can learn from that compassionate aspect of Arjun, right? And then in another aspect, we see Krishna as Arjun is under illusion, and then he's acting conditioned. And then when he acts conditioned, we have to see what is the philosophical point there, and we can learn from that action as a conditioned soul. So it's not necessarily contradictory. We have to see what is the philosophical point for us. We have to take the perspective and learn from it. So point is that Lord's associates, they're always liberated. But then at the same time, when they're bought under illusion, we should learn not to go under illusion, right? So the chapter 1, the essence of chapter 1, the whole chapter 1, why does it exist in Bhagavad Gita, is to give us need for spiritual knowledge and Arjun's qualification for spiritual knowledge, right? The soft-heartedness and the compassion that we are seeing in the verse 128 we saw. Prabhupada saying that. So chapter 1 gives us that why do we need spiritual knowledge? That's the first aspect. That is because even however cultured I may be, however intelligent I may be, but when illusions hit me hard, I will still need a teacher. So need a teacher to get out of that illusion, to get that spiritual knowledge. And then what qualification do I need? I need is soft-heartedness and compassion. Right? So when I'm in the conditioned mode of life, right, I will be bewildered. Right? There will be fear, there will be perplexity in my thoughts, there will be anxiety. So if I understand that all is under Lord's orchestration and learn from the illusion of Arjun, then I will be able to easily sail through those perplexing situations in life. Okay. And we will see that in the next verse, Prabhupada is saying that Arjun is showing ignorance just out of Krishna's will. So I just wanted to give this because you'll see this seesaw of emotions in Prabhupada's purport at many points, and not just about Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. There are many scriptures, when you read them, you'll see many contradictory things. But instead of just sitting down and getting doubtful about those scriptures, the goal should be to understand what is there for me to learn from it. So not getting distracted from that essence, that the need for spiritual knowledge, and then keeping that the qualification that Arjun is demonstrating here for us, the soft-heartedness and compassion. So I just wanted to bring this concept out because we will see this across Bhagavad Gita, and you might have seen this across other scriptures also when you read them. So now here, this is 29. So we see that Arjun is demonstrating some symptoms. And Prabhupada is telling us that they are primarily being demonstrated out of material fear of life. Okay, so now we come to verse number 30, where Arjun is saying that I'm now unable to stand here any longer. I'm forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only cause of misfortune. O Krishna, killer of the Keshi demon. And here Prabhupada clearly tells us Arjun was unable to stay on the battlefield and he was forgetting himself on account of this weakness of mind. So now Prabhupada is telling us that his weak in his mind, right? So so what we are seeing here is that now Arjun, in the earlier verse we saw, was more on a physical aspect, that trembling and hair standing on end, his gandi falling out. But here now Arjun is going on a he's on a mental state, right? So now he sees that it's a cause of misfortune. He's forgetting himself. His mind is reeling. So it's come from a physical aspect to a mental aspect, right? So this is a demonstration again for me to learn that how material situations create perplexity for me in this material world. Okay. And things just when things happen to me, I realize that how incomprehensible they are for me. And so I have to take shelter of somebody who can help me out of that complexity, right? So even if something is incomprehensible, it's only incomprehensible for me, but it might be that it's not incomprehensible for somebody else like we have spiritual teachers, we have Prabhupada, through his books we can know. So we can always approach somebody who has been through those incomprehensible situations and won through them. And so we can reach out to that person, right? So if I feel that I can figure out everything by myself, right, then that incomprehensibility becomes very demoralizing. It becomes disorienting for me. It becomes devastating, right? So instead of asking why this has happened to me, ask how I can serve Krishna, how I can come out of this incomprehensibility that I'm going through by approaching a teacher, by approaching somebody who has walked this path, right? So, so that's the sense that we should get out of when we see Krishna, when we are seeing Arjun's perplexities, right? So, and so what we do is we just pray and we try to do the best we can, and by approaching a teacher who can show us who's thinking about our welfare and can show us the path, right? Prabhupada is quoting this verse here, Bhayam Dviti Abhiniveshata Sayat. What this verse is about, that Bhayam, I won't go through the whole verse, just giving you why Prabhupada is just quoting a section of it. Dvitiya Abhiniveshata Sayat. What it means is that Dviti, the moment I see that Krishna and I are separate, we have separate interests, the Bhayam comes in my life, right? And why do I see that difference? Because of that aham mameti aspect. I have some principle, I have some prospect for myself in this material world. Oh, I need this. And I forget about what Krishna is asking me to do. Then that's where the bhayam comes in, the fear comes in. So that's the origin of the fear. The moment I realize that I am all by myself, there is nobody to help me out, that brings a lot of fear in our lives. So going back and kind of relying back on somebody whom we feel that can take away all my fear. Somebody, who, like, for example, Krishna himself says that if you want peace, that understand that Bhakti-Sastri BG tapasham sarva loka maheshwaram suhirdim sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shantim rachyati. That's the last verse of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna tells us that if you want peace, understand that I am the controller of everything. Right? Bhakti-Sastri BG tapasham. I am the enjoyer. Sarva loka maheshwaram. That I am the creator. I am the origin of everything. Suhirdim sarva bhutanam. I am always the best friend of everybody. If I keep telling this to myself, the bhayam slowly and steadily goes away. So and Prabhupada is telling us that this fearful situation comes when we are too affected by the material condition. So we want to get rid of that. So that's the message coming out of this verse for us to take home, that Arjun is seeing that weakness, and that's primarily coming from the bhayam, where because he's saying that I have some of my own thoughts which are separate from Krishna, and that's what's bringing the fear. So now if you see this phrase has these two words, nimittani, viparitani. So nimittani means causes, viparitani means just the opposite. So what Arjun is saying is that we will get exactly opposite of what we want, right? You all must have experienced in your lives that we strive hard for something and then nearly the opposite of that happens to us. You know, and our mind is left reeling, thinking that why did this happen, right? So that's the problem of misdirected self-interest. So that's coming from here, that we have to understand here. Nimittani viparitani, right? It's seeing as only the cause of misfortune here, just the opposite. That he went to war to look for fortune, to look for kingdom, and he could be a king, but then he's seeing that it's going to be opposite of that. So then coming to the verse 31. So going back to the slides. So I talked about the cause of compassion, which was in the 28th, was because he was acting as a pure devotee. In 29th was primarily because of material fear. Prabhupada mentions the two kinds of trembling. That is because of great spiritual ecstasy and under fear of material conditions. And under fear of material condition, his Gandiva is slipping out of his hands. So the Gandiva, if you know the story that when Karna had attacked Yudhishthir in the war in the Mahabharata, Yudhishthir had to retreat for some time because he was hurt and he had to recuperate. And so Arjun also comes out of the battle just to see how Yudhishthir is doing. And when he goes into his camp, Yudhishthir says, "Did you kill Karan?" Then Arjun says, "No, I did not kill Karan. I just came to see you." And then he starts to, Yudhishthir starts to blast him. And he says, "How dare you leave the battlefield? You should give up the Gandiva. You are a coward." Just the thought of giving up the Gandiva was so much of intensity for Arjun that he said that, "I'm going to kill you, Yudhishthira. How dare you say that I give up my Gandiva?" He was so attached to that Gandiva. It was a part of his body, kind of a thing. So then Krishna had to intervene and say that he had to resolve that issue. But I just want to say that Gandiva, which Arjun was never ready to give up, it was more dear to him than his own life. It was actually slipping out of his hand. So that's the situation. That's the extent of his material condition. And then we talked about cause of fearfulness. We refer to the verse 11 to 37. And then nimittani viparitani. Okay. And there are many of these signs that we see. I've put in here, and I've just collated them in one place. It's distributed over the three verses. Okay, so that's the verse up to 30. So now we come to the verse 31, where before I move ahead, anybody has any thoughts, anything that stood out, or anything that you want to talk about or expand upon? All good? Nothing? Okay, let's move forward. So next three verses are about the loss of enjoyment. And coming to the Bhagavad Gita, the 31st verse, here the word sukhani comes. He starts using the word sukhani. Sukhani means, where's that verse? Happiness. Prabhupada translates that happiness. So now he's saying that it's loss of happiness that's going to happen. So it's the loss of his enjoyment that he's now start talking about, right? So he's saying that I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsmen in the battle. So that's the way he's talking about enjoyment. So I was thinking once, Jayadvaita Maharaj, somebody asked Jayadvaita Maharaj that, what to do about relatives. They don't let us practice Krishna consciousness. There is so many relatives that are always interfering. Why are you doing this? You're chanting all the time, or you are young. This is for the old age. So somebody asked him that, and so he very calmly, I don't know if all of you know or don't know, Jayadvaita Maharaj. He's a very calm, a grave, and a very scholarly person. And he responds by saying that he starts by saying that relatives, they are relatives, they're not absolute. Okay. So you don't have to worry so much about them. And that's what Arjun is. So that was the first answer that Jayadvaita Maharaj gave. And so Arjun was being advised to kill them here, his own relatives. Right? So Maharaj was saying that they're relatives, they're not absolute. So don't worry about them. So, and then Maharaj went on to say that at least you should have the guts to stand up and fight for the priorities of your life. Right? Obviously without affecting other people's priorities, but we should be able to stand up for our own priorities, right? That much at least we should do. So I was just reminded of that episode when here discussion about relatives had just started in the Bhagavad Gita here, that killing my own kinsman, he's saying. Swajanam. Again, he uses the word Swajanam here. So that's what we have to understand, that now Arjun was being advised to kill them. So there is a concept of prayas and shreyas, and the prayas means I'm just trying to see Prabhupada. So yes, so prayas is short-term good. Okay, it's fun, let's do it. Right, for right now Arjun is very narrow-minded. He's looking at what is the short-term good. That's prayas in Shastra, that the word for that is prayas. But then shreyas, the word shreyas means long-term good. Okay, for example, all of you at some point in your lives might have given up something that's of interest to you for a bigger gain. I want a career, so I won't go out to play. When you're in school, you say, okay, I'll not go out to play because I have an exam in a week or in a month. So that is Shreya. So right now what Arjun is doing, he's looking at a very short-term good. He's not looking at the long-term good. So Krishna will take him from that prayas concept to the Shreyas concept in Bhagavad Gita. So that's what we should understand here. And I just highlighted one sentence where Prabhupada is bringing out here, which is important here, because last week we were discussing about that was this. I think it was Ashish Prabhu who was asking this question, that this war, why was it even needed? And it seemed as if Duryodhan was justified because his father was the king and he should be the king in line. So one reason I gave in there was that because the Pandavas are Kshatriyas, they need a kingdom to live upon, right? They cannot engage themselves in any other occupation. And Prabhupada here brings out the concept of Varnashram. So this is what Prabhupada is bringing, and then he'll talk more about in the later sections. So Varnashrama is the section. So Varna, there are 4 Varnas, as we know. There is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And Krishna will talk about them in later chapters. And then there are 4 ashramas. There is Brahmacharya, there is Grihastha-ashram, there is Vanprastha, and there is Sannyasa-ashram. So here Prabhupada is highlighting that the Varna of a Kshatriya makes it compulsory for that person in that Varna to be a king, to have something to rule over. And that is why when Krishna went to Duryodhan as a peace messenger, he said, don't give us a kingdom, just give us 5 villages. But then Duryodhan was adamant for that too. He didn't give that. So that's the reason why. So Krishna wanted just 5 kings, that they'll rule over that. So they needed something to rule over. And Prabhupada is highlighting this fact here, that the Kshatriyas require a kingdom for subsistence. They cannot engage in any other occupation, right? So the whole purpose of Varnashram, we will talk about it in more detail. 4th chapter, there is the verse in the 13th verse where Krishna will say that Chaturvarnya Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. He'll talk about that I am the one who has created these 4 Varnas. And the purpose is Guna and Karma, right? So the whole purpose of Varnashram system in the 5,000 years ago was to make our life as harmonious as possible with our spiritual growth, right? To give people engagement according to their strengths, according to their capacity, according to their interests. 5,000 years ago, the Varnas were not like as they are now, that, oh, I'm a born Brahmin, so I am a Brahmin. Okay, so it doesn't work. That's just a misrepresentation of the way Krishna wanted it. So Prabhupada is bringing that highlight here, that he was a Kshatriya. But then, so he's now decided to go into the forest and live a life secluded in frustration, which is not what a Kshatriya should do. Okay, so now we move on to the next verse, which is 32 to 35. Prabhupada has combined all these verses together. Another technical aspect, and I think I briefly touched upon it the last time also, you'll see that if you ever go to see another version of Bhagavad Gita, you might see that these verses might be separate. They might not all be four clubbed together. For example, even in Baldev Vidyabhushan's version of Bhagavad Gita, his commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, these verses are not together necessarily. Similarly, there are other acharyas in our line who have done this. There is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who has Gita Bhushan, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has, that's Baldev Vidyabhushan. Baldev Vidyabhushan's version is called Gita Bhushan. So what I'm trying to say is that Prabhupada, in many different places, just according to the message that's been given, he might club different verses together. Okay? So don't be surprised when you go to another version of Bhagavad Gita, even if it might be from our acharyas, in our line, Gaudiya acharyas, they might present it differently, even though the message is going to be exactly the same. So Prabhupada has clubbed these four verses together because here now he's talking about loss of enjoyment, and Prabhupada has brought all of them together. So the first verse talked about the blind conception of life, and then the second one talks about the typical calculations of a material person. Okay, and what are those? And we'll talk about that. I put here that the blind conception of life is that he's trying to run away from his responsibility and go to the forest. But in the material world, I always have this show-off tendency. I want to show off my knowledge. I want to show off my car, my house, my clothes, whatever it may be, my job, my degrees. So we have this show-off tendency. At least I have that. You might not, but so we have this show-off tendency. I have this show-off tendency, and that's the concept of material life. And then we will expound upon that from Prabhupada's purports here. So 32 to 35. Now Arjun starts using words such as, let me go back to the Bhagavad Gita. So in this section now, Arjun starts using words such as bhoga, jivita, rajena, right? It looks as if when we read this section here, that, what avail for us as a kingdom if we have to kill those who are our loved ones, teachers, fathers, and all that. Why should I wish to kill them? Even though they might kill me, I'm not prepared to fight. What pleasure will I derive from it? So it looks as if he's giving a speech for a Nobel Peace Prize, right? And here in this verse, Krishna is calling Arjun is calling Krishna Janardhan. Okay, and now if this is it's a sarcastic tone here Arjun is bringing out. Okay, the sarcastic tone is that Janardhan, the verb Janardhan obviously means maintainer of living entities. But then Janardhana also means killer of living entities, a killer of demons specifically, but living entities in general. So Arjun is sarcastically saying to Krishna that, Krishna, you are a maintainer of living entities. How are you desiring to kill everybody else? And if you want to kill others, why don't you go and kill them? Why do you want me to kill them? Right? So again, the concept of Shreyas and Preyas, as I mentioned to you, Preyas is looking at short-term goals. So what Arjun is doing with his narrow-mindedness, he's thinking that, okay, I'm going to rule for another 50, 100 years, might be, but then the sins that I will take over by killing so many people will go over for many lifetimes for me. Okay. So technically, the Pandavas just reigned for 37 years. When they came in Bhagavatam, we see that the moment they come to know that Krishna has left the planet Earth, gone back to Goloka, they also leave the kingdom to Parikshit Maharaj and leave. So they just rule for 37 years. So that's what Arjun is thinking, that, oh my God, my sins will keep recurring for many lifetimes to come. So it's a very foolish proposal, to be frank, right? So, and he's saying that ka priti sayaj. What pleasure there will be if I have to kill these people, right? And in the purport, now we will see that the word Govinda comes also, right? Has addressed him as Govinda as well as Janardana in these verses. Where does it go? Rakim no Raji in a Govinda. So he's calling him Govinda and as well as Janardana in the last end here. So now Prabhupada, the moment the word Govinda comes, Prabhupada becomes a bit emotional here. He becomes ecstatic here, right? So he starts talking about the word Govinda. What does it mean, right? So what the word Govinda is now Govinda means that who satisfies. Where's that word? Trying to get the exact meaning if Prabhupada has given it here somewhere. Okay, no. Okay. So Krishna is the object of all pleasures for cows and the senses. Yes, that's the meaning of the word Govinda, right? Govinda means who gives pleasure to the cow and senses. But now Arjun is using it very contrastingly. He's saying that no, Krishna should understand what will satisfy my senses, Arjun's senses. That's what Prabhupada is telling us, right? So Prabhupada now he kind of expounds on that word Govinda, and we'll read this section here, starting from here. So materially, somebody wants to read this? It's a good section here, starting from materially. Meaning of Govinda.
Sure, Bobby, I can do it.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his senses, and he wants God to be the order of the supplier for such satisfaction. The Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. But when one takes the opposite way, namely when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desire of the living entity are satisfied. Arjuna's deep affection for community and family members is exhibited here partly due to his natural compassion for them. He is therefore not prepared to fight. Everyone wants to show his opulence to friends and relatives, but Arjuna fears that all his relatives and friends will be killed on the battlefield, and he will be unable to share his opulence after victory. This is a typical calculation of material life.
Yes, thank you. So Prabhupada tells us that, so Prabhupada is expounding upon and giving us the details of what exactly the word Govinda means and how I have misconstrued the meaning of the word Govinda, thinking that he's an order supplier for me. That is why I keep asking him every time. Oh, Krishna, please give me a good job. Please get me this promotion. Oh, Krishna, I've fallen sick. Please fix me and give me some remedy. All that. I keep asking that what is going to satisfy my senses, right? And Prabhupada gives a very good analogy saying here that the Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. And now that's a very interesting thing here. And there is a verse there in, I forgot which comes from Srimad Bhagavatam. I can't remember the verse if I can. Okay, let me. So there it said that that Krishna, he fulfills the ambitions. So there are many people who approach him for material aspects. But then the way Krishna gives them those desires is a way in which they will never ask for it again anymore. Right? And what does he do is Ichhapidanam Nijapad Pallavam. Krishna, that's the last sentence of the verse that I'm trying to remember. I only could remember that one. So it says that he himself, he actually gives his lotus feet to that person who's coming to him for material desires. And he says further, Krishna says that and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also talks about that section in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he says that I know that this person is a fool, but I am not. Krishna is thinking that way. When I as a fool go to Krishna asking for desires. So Krishna says that this guy is a fool, but I am not. I am intelligent. So I will give him his desires in a way that he will never come back to me again, right? So that's what Prabhupada means here, that it'll not be given to a point where I'll start coveting for it. I'll become more desirous of that thing. So it could be in many ways. You know, it has happened to me many a times that I work very hard for something, and when I get that, I start questioning it. Is this what I worked so hard for? Was it even worth all my hard work and effort? So Krishna has his own way of showing it, right? So that's the beauty, and that's the meaning of the word Govinda, that we are supposed to, where's that? He's the object of all pleasure for cows and the senses. So the way Krishna acts when I ask for satisfaction of my senses, so the aspect of Govinda comes into the picture, and he doesn't fulfill my senses to the extent that I may covet them, but he eventually purifies my senses so that I can become desirous of satisfying Krishna's senses. So that's the essence of the word Govinda that we have to focus on. Okay. So then towards the end, here's this another section that I have highlighted for some reason here. Okay. And I have some notes also here. Okay. So the devotees of the Lord does not retaliate against the wrongdoer, but the Lord does not tolerate any mischief done to the devotee by the miscreants. The Lord can excuse a person on his own account, but he excuses no one who has done harm to his devotees. Therefore, the Lord was determined to kill the miscreants, although Arjun wanted to excuse them. Another very important aspect of Krishna being Bhakt Vatsala. We talked about that aspect here. That even though the devotees are so magnanimous that I might do something wrong to that devotee, the devotee will forgive me. But Krishna will never forgive me for mistreating that devotee. So that is why we should never mistreat anybody. We talked about this concept in the Nectar of Instruction also, that how when Dhruva was mistreated by his stepmother Suruchi, he went to the forest and he came back, and then he very respectfully treated Suruchi, or not, Suruchi wasn't there, sorry. Suruchi wasn't there. But so he didn't have any malign in his heart, or he was not thinking any bad about his stepmother anymore when he came back from the forest. But Prabhupada explains in the purport in the 4th canto, it's in the 9th chapter, I think it's verse number 23, where Prabhupada explains that Suruchi lost her son, Uttama, and then she also died in a forest fire. She became mad because of the loss of her son. And Prabhupada said that one of the reasons why this happened to her was because she mistreated Dhruva. The message for us to learn from there is that we should not mistreat anybody. Devotees, for sure, never. Otherwise, that's the Hatimata Aprad. Mahaprabhu says that, the mad elephant offense, when we offend a devotee. But then in general, we should not offend anybody in this world. We don't know who that person could be, right? Suruchi didn't know that her son or stepson was Dhruva, was such a pure devotee. And even though she didn't know it, she had to suffer the consequences because of that. And the reason that Prabhupada is giving us here, the reason why that person will suffer is not because the devotee wants him to suffer. The devotee will easily forgive that person. But Krishna will never forget that person. And Krishna will never excuse that person. For all the wrongdoings done to Arjun, to the Pandavas, to Draupadi, Krishna will never forget that, even though they might forget them. So that's a very heartening message for all us, because we are practicing devotees, that Krishna always is protecting us, right? And we should always have that faith. In Sharanagati, Bhakti Vinod Thakur says this, he sings that song in the introduction of Sharanagati. He says that, Avashya Rakshibe Krishna Vishwasa Palana. That Avashya Rakshibe Krishna, that Krishna will surely protect me. That Vishwas, that belief, that faith that a devotee has, it accentuates the faith, accentuates my bhakti. So having that faith that Krishna is always protecting me, and because Krishna is always protecting me, I'm not worried about what others are doing to me. I just tolerate it and I let go of that. So that's a very important message that Prabhupada is bringing out of this purport. Okay, so this was the loss of enjoyment section. So now we'll move on to the next section. That is the fear of sinful reactions. That's from the verse 36 to 38. And now let's go back to the quote here, to the another 6-liner here. Prabhupada rearranging verses so that we can grasp the essence, the thought processes, the flow of thought is maintained here. Okay, so fear of sinful reactions. Now, so what I put in here in the slides, then it'll take a minute to be there, is there's a conflicting role now that Arjun is presenting. On one hand is the role of a Kshatriya, okay, which I have put in here as Arthashastra. That's one of the aspects of the thought, and Prabhupada talks of both of them in the purport. Arthashastra says that he should kill them. Why? Because Did I put those here? No, I did not put. Let me go back to the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Prabhupada says right here that the Vedic injunction says that there are 6 kinds of aggressors who can be killed at once, and there is no sin incurred. So Prabhupada is saying such aggressors should be killed and there are no sins incurred. And who are those 6? A poison giver, one who sets fire to the house, one who attacks with deadly weapons, one who plunders riches, one who occupies another's land, and one who kidnaps a wife. And if you will notice, the Kauravas did all these 6 of them. There's this episode of Bhima being given poison. He was poisoned because he liked to eat. They mixed poison in the laddus, and they fed him, and then they pushed him in the river, which was really a misfortune for the Kauravas themselves, because he came back 10,000 times stronger. So they gave him poison. They created a house made of lac for them to live in, and then they set the house on fire. Obviously, they attacked them so many times with deadly weapons. That goes without saying in the war that happened. Plundered their riches, the kingdom that belonged to the Pandavas. They took that, so they plundered. They occupied land. All the kingdom was taken away, and then they also mistreated their wife Draupadi, and with an intention to misalign her, so malign her character. So this is the Arth Shastra that I'm talking about here, and Prabhupada is talking about in the purport. That's the Arth Shastra. That's based on politics. Any aggressor should be killed. What Arjun is doing, he's gone into the concept of Dharma Shastra, or more, you can say Kula Dharma. I think he uses that word Kula Dharma in the, let me see if he uses that here somewhere, or it might be in the further sections. Yeah, might be in the further section, but he uses the word Kula Dharma. So what Prabhupada is explaining to us in the purport is that he is thinking from a Dharma Shastra perspective, a Kula Dharma perspective, whereas he should have thought from the Artha Shastra perspective, which he is not doing that. Okay. And Prabhupada says in the purport that saintliness is not justified for a Kshatriya. Once again, so the Artha Shastra says a Kshatriya cannot act saintly, because a Kshatriya is meant to be a king. And if he starts acting saintly, then, culprits will start growing in his society, in the kingdom that he rules. And then Prabhupada brings out the concept of Ram Rajya, that even though Lord Ram was very saintly, but then he didn't hesitate even a second to kill the aggressor Ravan when he kidnapped Lord Ram's wife, Mother Sita. Okay. And then Arjun uses the word Madhav again, and again it's being used sarcastically here. And what it is saying that so Krishna is the husband of the goddess of fortune. So he's calling him Madhav, saying that you are the goddess of fortune. Why are you telling me to bring out misfortune for others? Why are you becoming a cause of misfortune for others? Okay, and that's again a misuse of the name of Krishna, right? So, but then so there's the difference of Dharma Shastra and Arth Shastra that Arjun is being perplexed about, and he's confusing between both of them. Okay, and Dharma Shastra would say that killing your relatives is not permitted, friends and relatives. So that's the concept that's being Prabhupada is bringing out here. Okay, so the word Madhav, the name Madhav, as I said, means that he's the goddess of fortune. Okay, but Arjun is misinterpreting that name and saying that you are the goddess of fortune. Why are you doing something that will cause misfortune? And there's a message here for us to understand, that the logic here is that Krishna, so Arjun is saying Krishna is bringing inauspiciousness, he's bringing misfortune. Okay, so what we have to understand is that Krishna's actions are not always pleasant. Okay, but they're always benevolent. That's one aspect to understand and differentiate between. Okay, that what Krishna might do to me might not always be pleasant for me, but it's always in my he's my benefactor. He's always thinking good about me. I might not understand it, the process might not be pleasant the way I'm being taught that, but then the end will always be beneficial for me, right? Just as a surgeon, when the surgeon is doing a surgery on somebody, he's cutting open somebody, probably cutting off a leg because it's been infected or something of that. it might seem that that person is very, callous, hard-hearted. But then actually the surgical knife is cutting, but it's actually for the best of the patient, right? So similarly, the surgical knife of Krishna is cutting the bodily misconceptions for Arjun. And Arjun is looking at that as inauspiciousness. Okay. And I've heard this very beautiful analogy from a senior devotee. I heard it a few years ago, that once what happened in that senior devotee's house, that there was a window that was open and a bird flew into his house. So what everybody would do, right, is that he would open the window or open the door and say, little birdie, you can go out from here. But then the bird flew into the other room. And there the devotee, he went and opened the other windows of that other room. And now the bird flew into the third room, fourth room, fifth room. And once the bird had gone through all the rooms and it came back to the first room where it had actually come in through, it found that window open and it just ran out of that window. But then while the bird was leaving, the bird, and that's the way the devotee interpreted, that's the thought of a devotee, that he's always looking for what message is there from Krishna for me in here. So what the devotee said, that the bird looked at the devotee, and the look said that, see, you tried to kill me, but I am going out scot-free. Similarly, I feel whenever I am put in a bad situation, that Krishna, you're trying to hurt me, but see, out of my intelligence, I came out of this situation, alive. So what we see Krishna's benefaction that he's doing for us, being a benevolent father, I see it as a harm that he's doing to me, and I interpret it that way, and then that's where the fear comes in. But I should not see it that way. I should see it the other way, that there is something good in it, even though it sounds bad for me. So that's the concept that we have to understand, and what Prabhupada is bringing out for us in the name of Madhava. Prabhupada is explaining that in the purport for us. Okay. So some very beautiful concepts coming here. When I read this chapter the first time, I felt that, I don't know, it doesn't have a lot of sense. I can skip it. But then when I read it, you understand there's so much here for us to grasp. Okay, so we are coming to verse 37 and 38. And here we continue the discussion of fear of sinful reactions. And here is the words that are being used, which I was saying. Kulakshaya kritam dosham he's using. And he's using the same phrase twice. Kulakshaya kritam dosham in Boston. So he's using the word kula. Okay, so let's see the translation. O Janardhan, although these men, their hearts overtaken by greed, see no fault in killing one family or quarreling with friends, why should we, who can see the crime in destroying a family, engage in these acts of sins? So once again, this concept of Dharma Shastra and Arth Shastra. So now what Arjun is confusing is that he's saying that there is a Kula Dharma. Okay, so he's talking about that Kula Dharma. But then the Kula Dharma is only for a Kula, right? It's only for a specific dynasty. But then what Arjun's narrow-mindedness is telling him is that this Kula Dharma, he's thinking that this is my duty in life. And he's seeing a conflict in what Krishna is telling him to do versus what his Kula Dharma is, right? And we also face this every day in our lives. I always face this every morning. Or should I wake up early and do my chanting? Or should I sleep more and give more rest to my body so that I can wake up more energetic, right? Should I give my child Vedic education, or should I send him to a conventional education so that, when he grows up, he could become a successful in his social life? And there's no harm in thinking that, but this contradictory thoughts come to us all the time, right? And because that is I'm thinking from a narrow-mindedness. Oh, this is my dharma, my Kula Dharma. I always convince myself many a times that taking care of my body is my Kula Dharma. So I should sleep more today, not get up early. And all these is being clarified in the Bhagavad Gita, right? It fortifies our intelligence. Whenever we read Bhagavad Gita, it fortifies our intelligence, and it makes the intelligence the parent in the room. Unfortunately, right now, the mind, which is very fickle, which is very, like a drunk monkey, it's very fickle. Right now, that is the parent in the room. And but then by reading Bhagavad Gita, the intelligence becomes the parent in the room, and then the intelligence can guide me. Do this, don't do that, don't even think of doing this. And that's what we have to do. I have made a habit that every day I read a chapter of Bhagavad Gita. If it interests you, please feel free to take up that habit also. not the whole chapter, not the purports, but just the translations. And you can do both. Either you like Sanskrit, English. I with a group of devotees I do that, and but that is because it helps us fortify our intelligence. A chapter a day of reading Bhagavad Gita, it fortifies our intelligence, and then we don't fall trap to the Kula Dharma versus what is my dharma towards Krishna. I don't become mixed up in that, that bodily concept of life. And that's what is being brought out here. And again, Prabhupada is talking about the Kshatriya Varna, that they're not supposed to refuse in the battle, or or they cannot even give up the gamble if they have been invited by somebody. That's the reason when first gambling match happens between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and Kauravas lose everything. Sorry, the Pandavas lose everything. But then Dhritarashtra is very, kind of, he's feeling soft and hard and saying, "Oh, you asked me for a boon." He says this to everybody that, please ask for a boon. And the Pandavas, Draupadi says to him that, "Oh, give all the kingdom back. Whatever they have lost, give them back." And Dhritarashtra said, "Yes, please have it." And then they just leave. They get back on their chariots, and the Pandavas are ready to leave. But then now Duryodhana's evil mind, he says, "Oh my God, my foolish father has given them everything back. I have to figure out something." So as a code of Kshatriya, he sends somebody again to the Pandavas and says, "Duryodhana is inviting you for another match of gamble." And that's the reason Yudhishthira could not say no to it, because that's Kshatriya Dharma. So you will notice that the Dharma 5,000 years ago was very, very different than we see it nowadays. That is why the Bhagavad Gita is so complex for many people. That is why we need Prabhupada's purport to understand them. So here Prabhupada is highlighting that the Kshatriya is not supposed to refuse a battle or a gamble. Okay, and then so that was the mindset of a Kshatriya 5,000 years ago. So that is why the second gambling happens and they lose everything again, and Draupadi is humiliated, and then the Bhim takes the vows that I will open up the chest of Dushashan and drink his blood, and I'll break the thigh of Duryodhan, all that. So he takes those vows, and all that unfolds as we see, so and so forth. But so the dharmas were very different. So if anytime you get confused on what Prabhupada is saying, always remember that the mindset of people 5,000 years ago was very, very different than the mindset that is of right now people. And Prabhupada is bringing that aspect out for us again and again for our welfare, right? So the point here is that everybody, so what Arjun is saying and Prabhupada is mentioning here is that Arjun, however, could see the evil consequences and could not accept the challenge, and Arjun decided not to fight. So in one sense, Prabhupada is praising Arjun here. Okay, so that's the message for us, is that every devotee, every person should think of the consequences of our actions, right? Right. You all must have faced this question from your relatives at some point or the other. I have faced it so many times, and I boil with anger whenever any of my relatives say that is this what you're learning in ISKCON? Oh, you're supposed to be chanting. How are you so angry? How do you get so angry? So devotee always fear this question. At least I always fear that, and I'm always very careful. But then it always never works. I lose my anger many times talking to my relatives, especially my parents. So the message for us here is that always think of consequences, right? So that's the message here. And as I mentioned out, there are 6 lines here. Sorry, not in this one. 2 verses here being brought together. 6 lines were in the earlier phrase, earlier verse. Okay, so now coming to the verse 39, which is talking about. Did I put? Okay. Oh yeah, 2, both of them here. Okay, destruction of family traditions. Okay, and then there's a stepwise here. There are 39 to 43. There are 4 verses here, and you will see there is a step by sequence that Arjun will follow. What's going to happen here? Okay, so let's start from verse 39, where he says, "With the destruction of dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in religion." Okay, Prabhupada bringing out the Varnashrama system concept here again, and he's talking about that how here now. So he's saying that Arjun is saying, Kula dharma nashyati, adharmo abhibhavati. So he's saying that, so even in the Vedic system, stress is on Kula Dharma, on Varnashrama system. But what Prabhupada taught us, what Krishna teaches us, we are not going to follow our Varnashrama or our Kula Dharma on the cost of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so that's one thing we have to remember always, right? So Varnashrama, as I mentioned earlier, Varnashrama is not essential for practicing bhakti. Varnashrama is conducive for material life for sure, but it's not necessary. Okay, but if we understand what my guna and karma is, what is my quality, in which varna do I set into, I should follow it, because it will make my life harmonious for my spiritual growth. But then it's not necessary that it's essential for my bhakti. No. Okay, and if you want to understand what my varna is, where do I stand it, we can always do that by observation, by introspection, and by associating with other devotees. We can always understand that, but it's not compulsory. That's something I wanted to highlight here. And Prabhupada is bringing this out, that in Varnashrama system, there are many traditions, right? That there are elders, if the elders die, their family traditions are lost, and the younger members wouldn't have learned those family traditions. So Prabhupada is highlighting those, and that is the fickle-mindedness of Arjun, that we have this Vedic system, we have this Varnashrama system, I have a Kula Dharma, and I'm going to not give up my Kula Dharma. But what Krishna is telling him, give up everything for me, because I'm telling you this, right? And so, as I said, Kula Dharma means the dharma of the dynasty, right? So Arjuna, and there are two words here which I highlighted in the text. Yeah, so Pranashyati and Sanatana. So what Pranashyati means, it becomes vanquished. And then the word Sanatana means eternal. So now, so Arjun is using two very contradictory words in the same verse, right? He's saying that Pranashyati is referring to destruction, Sanatana is referring to eternal, but he is saying that Arjun is thinking that my Kula Dharma is Sanatana, is eternal, whereas it's Pranashyati, it will get destroyed. And both these words are contradictory, again showing the perplexity of Arjun. Okay, let's see in this here. So that's the first aspect that is being brought out, death of the elderly in this one. And then what happens when the death of elderly happens? Family traditions stop. And and then the destruction happens. And then the destruction happens, right? Okay, yeah. And I remember reading there, one devotee was sharing with me, a senior devotee was sharing with me his experience, that he went to a very pious Gujarati family's house. As Gujaratis, they're all very pious. He saw that there was on their wall they had this the pictures. So they had their great grandfather's picture. So great grandfather, devotee, tilak, chanting, bag in his hands, dhoti and everything. That was a great grandfather. Then grandfather was in a Nehru suit. I don't know if you don't know what a Nehru suit is. Jawaharlal Nehru was the first Prime Minister of India. He would wear a very specific kind of a dress, tight pants and this nice kurta, a body hugging jacket. And then, so that was it. So the grandfather was in that dress. Then came to the father, and the father was in a very proper British suit and a tweed suit. And then the son, who was alive, was he had his hair colored, and he had an earring, and then he was wearing Bermudas. So that's what Kula Dharma, the Kulakshaya means. Kulakshaya is the destruction of the dynasty. That was a picture of, that was a very good, vivid expression of how traditions are lost. And that's what is being talked about here, that the family tradition is vanquished. And that's the tradition vanquishing happen here. Okay, so next, coming to the next aspect of it, where Arjun is saying is that the women get polluted, and when women get polluted, unwanted progeny is brought forth. Okay, so this is the verse number 40. So he's saying women become polluted, degradation of womanhood, and then from that comes unwanted progeny. Okay, and Prabhupada is talking here about women, that women are prone to be misled and degradation. I just wanted to bring out this concept here because I'm sure it's a touchy concept for everybody. And many a point you might have heard it. I have heard it many a times that Prabhupada calls. He says that women are less intelligent, and it becomes more evident when we come to the 9th chapter. There is a verse where Krishna speaks that. So I'll just give a brief thought here, but I won't go into detail. And if you're interested, we can talk offline. But when Prabhupada says that women are less intelligent, or as he's saying in the purport here, that they are very prone to degradation, they require protection, and they can be easily misled. So Prabhupada is saying many things here. So it doesn't mean, so it's not about a material or spiritual aspect here, because materially we know that women are as successful as men. And spiritually also, we know that women are actually more successful than men. If you just look around into this room that we have here, there are more women than men. So they are more inclined to spiritual knowledge. They are more attracted towards spiritual. So in a Vedic system, when we talk of intelligence, it talks about understanding the fundamental concepts of life, right? So generally for females, the identification with the body is more, right? There is a sense of sentimentality with women. And that is why, because of the sentimentality, women become devotees very easily. Okay. And so men are more rational. They always try to think about everything. That is why they become less devotees. They think, oh, why is Prabhupada saying this? Why is Krishna doing this? And they just try to keep it into a philosophical thought process. And that's why they don't come to bhakti so easily. So there's a misfortune for men there. So, so the difference is not that the women are inferior, but what is being said, that there's a purpose for women's sentimentality, because women, they take their mothers, they have this eternal nature of being a mother, and to be a mother, they have to be sentimental, they have to be loving. Whereas men, they being more rational, they are less, it's always saying that motherhood is always more important than fatherhood. Yeah, but then so mothers have a much special role in bringing up children than men. And so that, with that purpose in mind, sentimentality has been endowed more to women. And because of that sentimentality, Prabhupada is saying that there is an easy chance that women can be misled. So never think that Prabhupada is giving them an inferior position, giving women an inferior position. Actually, women are more intelligent than men because of their sentimentality. If they use that sentimentality properly, as many women here across ISKCON, you have seen women are always in larger number. They are using that sentimentality to connect to Krishna. They don't go into philosophical inquiry process like men. And we see that in Bhagavatam also. Bhagavatam, when Krishna and the Balram, they're playing in the forest, and Krishna tells his friends that, there are these Brahmins nearby, they're doing a Vedic sacrifice. Go and ask them for food and tell them that Krishna and Balram are hungry. So the Krishna and Balram's friend go there, and they ask those Yagya Brahmins that, Krishna is here, he's hungry, please give something to eat. And those Brahmins are so engaged in their Vedic process, which is for satisfaction of Krishna actually. They're so engaged that they don't even look at Krishna's friends. They don't even pay attention to them. And then the friends come back and say to Krishna, they didn't even listen to us. Krishna then tells them, now you go to the women of those, to the wives of those Brahmins. So the friends go to the wives of those Brahmins and says, mother, Krishna is in the forest, he's hungry. Do you have something to eat for him? Without thinking anything, women just get up, take up everything they have and run towards Krishna. That's the proper use of sentimentality. That's the attraction we need to have to Krishna, not to get into a philosophical inquiry process. So I just wanted to bring this out. It's a big concept in ISKCON in general. I have had this in book distribution. I have met women who have just outright rejected Bhagavad Gita because of the way Krishna talks about women, or Prabhupada talks about them. They never give us a chance also. I had this incident in when I was distributing books in Boston Veg Fest. A lady was just walking by. It was a Westerner. She was just walking past, and I said, I want to show you this Bhagavad Gita. And she, without even looking at me or stopping for the book or anything, she just kept, she said that I have this book and it just talks improperly about women. And she just walked away. And I was just saying that, give me a chance to at least explain to you. So that happens all the time. So, but it's more for us to understand why Prabhupada said this, why Krishna brings that concept out. Okay, I'll take a pause here. Any thoughts from anybody or anything that strikes you or comes to your mind? Please work
Thank
with me, devotees.
for bringing that point up. It always bothered me about when I read the Bhagavad Gita that about the woman being less intelligent.
Yeah.
Concept. Yeah, that's excellent, actually. Thank you.
Yes, and I will talk more about it when we come to the 9th chapter. It could be practically a whole 1.5 hour worth of discussion we can have around that. I had that thought always when, why is Prabhupada saying it? But when I gave it a thought, I heard from senior devotees, I did some research of my own, some introspection. I realized that Prabhupada, actually, you'll see that when you see Prabhupada's disciples, Prabhupada's lady disciples, all the women, they wrote a book called The Bond of Love. You can look it up. I have it. I have read it. 600 of Prabhupada's disciples have written how they felt Prabhupada's love towards them, the love of a father. And they have given very distinct episodes in that book at how they felt the love of Prabhupada as a father, and which just melted their heart. And they just forgot about everything. Prabhupada would many times, Yamuna Mataji, one of Prabhupada's premier devotees, disciples, Prabhupada would have fun with her. She was like a daughter to him. And he would say, "Oh, Yamuna, you're a woman, you are less intelligent." And she would just say humbly, "Yes, Prabhupada, whatever you say." But then Prabhupada would say, "But you are not a woman, you are a Vaishnava. So that is why you are topmost intelligent." So it's just a matter that we have to understand and imbibe. And as I was saying earlier, not just get baffled by why Prabhupada is saying this, why Shastra is saying this, I'm not going to read it. Give it some time, think about it, but never give it up. And we'll talk about it more in the 9th chapter. But thank you for sharing your thought here, Mataji. Any more thoughts? Otherwise, we'll wrap up this chapter today.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, just
Hare Krishna.
one question. Towards the middle of this purport, a little further down, where it says, according to Kanaka Pandita,
Yeah.
women are generally not very intelligent and therefore not trustworthy. I guess I can understand based on your explanation what the the not very intelligent part, but I guess how does that lead to not being trustworthy?
So it's trustworthy, and let me go up, Prabhupada. I think it talks about that. So trustworthy in the sense that he's saying because they are very prone to be tricked by others. So they can be very easily misled, right? That's why Prabhupada is saying. So when if you say that this person can be misled, for example, my son, right? I know we have children, many of us have children. I know my son that he can be very easily misled, right? He will meet a few of his friends and then he will hear something there and he'll come and tell me that. But I don't trust that thing because I know that he can be easily misled by others. He's just a child. And that's why Prabhupada is comparing women to children here in this purport. As children are very prone to be misled, women are similarly prone. So the trustworthiness is not because that person has a desire to cheat others, but it's more of that they can be easily cheated and they can easily believe into what others are saying. That is why we cannot say that, okay, this person is, the concept that this person is bringing out could have been fed into his or her mind from somebody else. That is why I should not just take it on the worth of the word that is coming out, but I should also think it through. So it's not necessarily to say that that person has a cheating tendency or the person has a cheating mindset or wants to cheat others, but it's more of that because that person is very simple. Other people can feed thoughts which will make that person to think in another way. That's the way to look at it, Prabhu. Did that make sense, Prabhu, to you?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So at many times you will notice, and this is another completely different concept we can talk about in detail is later, but the words Prabhupada will use are coming from a very British English, because he was born up in a British environment when British were ruling India. He went to British schools. His college was a British, his teachers were Britishers, Scottish teachers. When he uses words, they have a very, very specific meaning. Unfortunately, my English is very mixed and diluted. It's coming from a culture of social media, Instagram and Facebook, whatnot. And also It's coming from Indians picking up English and then teaching English to the following generations, where the meaning of those words can also get mixed up. And there are many other sections in Bhagavad Gita where this concept will come up, and I'll elaborate upon it. But whenever I get confused about a word that Prabhupada has used, I always go back and look at a dictionary, and I look at all the possible meanings of those words. And then I say, okay, Prabhupada was referring to this particular meaning of that word. So that's another concept. We'll talk about it in more detail, but I just wanted to bring it out for all of us to meditate upon. Okay, so we are at the destruction of family traditions. So we talked about the concept of varnashram. So we said that women get polluted, unwanted progeny comes in, and then it makes life hellish, and the culture is destroyed. Let's see that in the next verses. Then I'll come out to the purports. So it's 41. Okay. An increase of unwanted population certainly cause hellish life, both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performance for offering them food and water are entirely stopped. See, Prabhupada is bringing out so this concept, when it says the performance of offering them food, this is the concept of Pindadan. Some of you might have heard it. It's kind of lost, not necessarily lost, but doesn't have that much importance. But my parents, for example, still follow this process. And so the concept of Pindadan comes from the Vedic thought process that when a person leaves this life, leaves the body here, the next generation offers food and other objects to Vishnu, so that Vishnu can bless that particular elderly who has left his or her body. So that's the thought process behind it. So what we are doing is we are offering prayers to Lord to so that he may get pacified and have mercy on the devotee, right? In Bhurijan Prabhu, in his book called Surrender Unto Me, which is his version of Bhagavad Gita, he says that that Pindadan, it's not supposed to be seen as just a ritual, but it's also because even Mahaprabhu himself did that. If you read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he did Pindadan for his father. He went to Gaya to do that when his father left his body. So he did Shraddh ceremony for his father, and so because he didn't want to set a concept that, because I'm a bhakta, all this is nonsense. No. And never did Prabhupada say that to us. Never did Mahaprabhu present that to us. So Prabhupada was never negligent. If you will notice that even when Prabhupada left, when Prabhupada had taken sannyas, there was a stipend that used to go to his family, even after ISKCON was created. I don't know if you know this, but because he was still taking care of his family, he was never negligent. When the ISKCON Krishna Balram Mandir in Vrindavan was opened, he invited all the local Brahmanas priests to do all the Vedic ceremonies that were needed to install deities. But then he told his disciples, and he wrote down in his purports also, that the chanting that was being done, the kirtan that was being done, that was more than enough for the initiation purpose. So there is always two aspects in bhakti. There is paramarthika, which is the supreme goal of Krishna consciousness. But along with that, there is vyavaharika, which is the ordinary dealings for a bhakta. So I don't say that because I'm a devotee, all my relatives are nonsense, I don't care about them. We take care of devotees. We talk to them like regular people. We try to have a heartfelt relationship with them. So here, the concept of Pindadan being brought about, Prabhupada is saying it, and he also brings about a verse. Let me see that. Devarishi Bhutapta Nirnam Pitranam. He talks about that verse. Yes. So this verse is here, 11.5.41. You can read it, the purport in detail. But what this verse means is that one who has taken complete shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, he can give up all kinds of his obligations, his or her obligations, towards demigods, towards other sages, towards living entities, towards family members, everybody. But what Prabhupada is explaining to us in the purport here, and in general, what I'm mentioning to you is that we should not give up all these obligations just because we have come to bhakti. This is for somebody who has fully dedicated himself or herself to Krishna. which is an Uttam Adhikari, which we read in the Nectar of Instruction. That person can give up all the obligations. This is not meant for me. So Arjun is rightly bringing out this concept that Pindadan will be lost. There will be no performance of offering for food for the elders, and our family tradition will be lost. So this is again. So this is about Arjun's philosophy here being and Prabhupada is kind of expounding upon him, and he's kind of saying, yeah, this makes sense. He's saying that. But then also he's giving us this verse to balance both the thing. Paramarthika, my supreme goal in Krishna consciousness, versus Vyavaharika, my ordinary dealing with other people. That's something to always remember. There's a okay. So next, let's go to the 42nd verse. By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kind of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. Okay, so Prabhupada is saying that the community projects for the 4 orders of human society are set forth by the institution of Sanatana Dharma or Varnashrama Dharma, designed to enable the human being to attain his ultimate salvation. As I was saying, Varnashrama Dharma, the purpose of Varnashrama Dharma is only to make my life harmonious for my spiritual growth. There's no other purpose for Varnashrama Dharma. So Prabhupada is saying that if that concept is in mind, then we should not break that dharma. Okay. So so that's what Prabhupada is highlighting here in the purport here, 42. And then Arjun is talking about the community projects and families. So that's what Prabhupada is bringing out in the purport here. And the culture will be destroyed, community projects will be lost, that kind of, if we give up this dharma of ours. That is what Prabhupada is highlighting here in this purport. So that's the verse 42. Okay. Okay, so coming to verse 43 now. Here, Arjun says that, I have heard by disciplic succession that those who destroy family tradition dwell always in hell. An important point Krishna is bringing out here, Arjun is bringing out actually, that he has heard from authorities. He's not quoting that, okay, this is what I feel or think, not a personal experience. He is talking about something heard from authorities. Okay. So, but then for devotees, so now that's a good thing that he's doing, and Prabhupada is praising him for that. But then for a devotee, my Kula Dharma is, so what is my duty? My family, my tradition should be, is to satisfy Krishna. So, and that is by rendering pleasing service to Krishna, right? So, so that's the concept being brought out here, that there's a disciplic succession. He's hearing from disciplic succession. That's good. But the part that he's taking out from the disciplic succession, what he has heard, is he's misusing it. Again, the concept of Dharma Shastra versus Artha Shastra. His job was to listen to Krishna. That is his Kula Dharma. That is his family tradition. But now he's saying that the family tradition has told me something, nonsensical, and I should be following that. Okay. And Prabhupada is bringing out again the concept of Prashchita, which is atonement. We talked about Prashchita and Pashyata in Nectar of Instruction, first verse. So there was the concept of repentance is more important. But if the process is of atonement, which is Prashchita, is done with the thought that I'm pleasing Krishna and there's a sense of repentance and also in there in the heart, then this becomes of extreme value for us. So that's the 43rd purport. Let's see. Do I have anything else here? Okay, conclusion. Let's just wrap this up. Let's this chapter up. 44, 45, and 46. So there's this part, 44, 45, and 46 is the beginning of the conclusions. The word 44 is the beginning of the conclusion, that I shall not fight. He's saying that to Krishna. So that's the beginning here. And 44, again, he uses the word Suajanam. Okay. Again, so just imagine that he's been using the word again, Suajana, my people, my kinsmen. So this is the beginning of his decision to not fight. Okay. So that's here in the 44th verse. 45th is, better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, were to kill me unarmed and unresisting on the battlefield. Now, this is again very anti-Kshatriya thought that he has. Very foolish. It sounds very foolish, right? So he's saying that, okay, they can kill me. Let them kill me. Okay. He's ready to go out and beg, right? That, oh, I'll go and beg and make a sustenance for myself. But then for a Kshatriya, begging is unthinkable. As I mentioned, the Varnashrama system is based on guna and karma. And Arjun, as his mindset, as his attitude towards life, is more of a Kshatriya. Begging will never work for him, right? So there is this Kshatriya spirit that he's giving up, which is not appropriate, right? And we see that in Mahabharata also. There is an episode when Bhima goes to find a lotus for Draupadi. So Draupadi she finds a lotus and she says, oh, I want more of these. She says to Bhima, and then Bhima eventually finds that lake where those lotuses are growing, but that lake belongs to a demigod, Kuvera, and his followers tell Bhima not to take anything from there. But Bhima jumps into it and says that a Kshatriya never begs anybody. He never begs favors from anybody. So we see that Kshatriya aspect also in many places in Mahabharata. Okay. So then comes to the last verse of this chapter, which is Sanjaya speaking, that Arjun, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrow and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. Right? So Arjun has vowed not to kill anyone. Then he puts down his bow. Okay. And I told you that about how valuable that Gandiva is for him, right? That he was ready to kill Yudhishthir when Yudhishthir said that, give up this Gandiva. How dare you not kill Karna? How dare you come out of the battlefield? So he's saying that something so significant for Arjun, that was that he's given to him, I think from the demigods, that he's ready to give that up. And he sits down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. So we can just only imagine how disturbed Arjun might have been at this point, right? So Arjun stops speaking. Sanjaya comes in again. It's a good way of looking at it. It has the Bhagavad Gita as it's a historical event, but then it has a much deeper meaning for us, right? We have to look at it from our reasoning, understand why this is happening, and all these things, all these griefs that we have seen Arjun presenting, all of them, they suck away, they eat away our determination. And that is why we should hear from authorities, so that our determination does not fade away in bhakti. It always remains as it is. And I can move forward in this process. I can give up that dehatma buddhi. Okay. That weak determination of practicing Krishna consciousness. I can give that up. Okay. Every day, every morning, practically it happens to me that I don't feel like chanting today. Oh my God, 2 hours. But then we always do it. All of you do it, right? So all of this process, all of what Arjun is going through is meant for us to understand that all these things will affect us for sure. Miseries will never stop reigning in our lives. We should never give up determination. We should keep fighting. We should keep taking the medicine that has been given to us by Prabhupada. The disease is huge, but I should be ready to take the medicine and keep up my determination and never give up. And I rest my case here for this chapter. Thank you very much. Sorry, I went over a few minutes. Anybody has any last minute thoughts, any questions, anything that's floating up in your mind that you would want to bring up, please.
No, Prabhuji, great class. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Prabhuji, you are so good. You are explaining very good. Thank you so much.